Hey everyone, welcome to Rise of the GM, GM Lessons number 3. Just want to thank you all for joining in or watching this later if you get a chance. Running a little late today, but that's all right. Just working on some things, and just want to give you all a heads up on like our timing of how the podcast is going to work over the next few weeks. We're about halfway through kind of our different schedule. This is the third of these little snippets of stuff that I feel like I've learned and just kind of wanted to pass on in a short amount of time while Matthew's on sabbatical. Next week, we'll have our third and final pre-recorded episode. So that's next Thursday. And then the week after that, there'll be one more of these times where I just jump on briefly and talk for a bit and share some things I'm learning. And then on May 2nd, we'll be back into our normal live on YouTube episodes that go into that, and then they'll move into our podcast feeds and things like that. Just want to encourage you all. A good way to support the channel, to support us, is to subscribe on YouTube, to follow on Spotify or on your Apple Podcasts or wherever you do that at. And then of course, just letting people know about the podcast and about the things that we offer. If you're enjoying that or if it's been helpful to you at all, that's a really cool and helpful thing for us. And we just, again, want to say thank you for being a part of this, being a part of this cool journey. And we've really enjoyed it and look forward to continuing it on for that. When we jump back in with our live episode on May 2nd, we're going to be jumping into a haversack questions, kind of take a whole episode to do that and just to spend some really good time on questions. But then we'll be jumping into just our normal kind of talk through about what it looks like to run games and just some encouragement, encouraging people as they're learning their craft and kind of things like that. But the thing I wanted to talk about today, real briefly, and we may get into this in an actual episode at some point, is the idea of downtime. And I actually want to throw out a shout out to Josh Morton, who's been a part of our podcast. He has asked several questions and been a contributor in that way, as well as actually being on it. But I was talking to him today about some things to talk through, and he mentioned downtime as a thing that could be talked about, and some things that I've learned. And I actually look at downtime in my own games, and we had a little bit different thought process, because he said he's enjoyed games that I've run and the downtime that there is, and whether it's travel or in a city or just spending some time. But that's actually something I feel a little insecure about a lot of times. And I think it's because I don't give it enough thought. And there's another kind of thing that happens in my games that I'm going to get to in a minute. But when I first started, the first RPG I played, this WoW that we've talked about earlier on, there was a lot of opportunity for downtime. That was just kind of the nature of the game. There was the campaign had a large overarching story that was going on, and it wasn't a thing that was if we get really urgent about things and move in this direction, it's gonna save the world kind of thing. This was a longer term process, and I think that played a big role in the ability to have downtime. Is there were urgent things going on, but there was also this opportunities to be hey, we're not really sure what the next step is in trying to fix the problem, or we need to do some research and figure out where we need to go next. So there was opportunities to say, hey, we're kind of in the city that we have friends in. This person over here is a good craftsman, and maybe we can have them make some things for us. My ranger had a lot of trick arrows and things like that I would have people make. And, it's we're going to spend a month and we're going to have that stuff happen. We're going to do some research. WoW had a mechanic in it where you could train. So there were times where I was I'm going to go work at the docks or on a ship for a month. And then when I came back, I had some skill in sailing, kind of thing. And that was built and the game was built a lot to be able to have some downtime, and I loved that a lot. There, you can build a lot of things, you can do a lot of away from the table storytelling, that if your group is into that, that's a really cool thing. Moving into the games I've run, I think it's not purposeful, but I tend to get a little more about it gets urgent really fast, where it's hey, there is this cataclysm coming. If we don't do something about it really soon, then bad stuff's going to happen. The world's going to end. And so you don't really have that time to say, hey, we're going to take 3 months and go kind of travel about, see our families, check out my old town. That's not really, that tends to not happen as much for me. But that's been an insecurity for me when I think about downtime, because I liked it so much as a player, that I want to try to figure out ways to do that. So 2 ways that I kind of have gotten into that a little bit is to allow for at least the process that can happen during downtime, where things are learned or maybe some role playing happens. One of those is during travel. I've talked about this in the podcast a lot, but my games tend to end up being globetrotter games, where you go from place to place to place and you see all these things, and no matter what I do, it ends up crossing continents and things like that. So there's a lot of travel, and there's a lot of opportunities to talk about okay, you're in this wagon or on these horses or walking on foot for a month, and hopefully and a lot of times in my games there's stops and there's interruptions and things, but there's times where it's you don't want to play out necessarily every hour of that travel. And it's okay, you traveled over the course of 3 days. As you all were walking, or as you were sitting around the fire, what kind of things did you talk about? Or even giving a primer to what's a point of your back history that you maybe shared, around the fire. And I want to jump into this. Clyde just said, I completely agree with, it gets urgent really fast. Happens a lot in my games, but my party also loves downtime, so it becomes difficult to juggle the apocalypse and reading time with the locals. Yeah, I feel that, and that's something I'm constantly trying to push back into. So one of these being the travel, allowing for that. But then a lot of times it's with arc breaks for me, and we've kind of talked about this when we were planning an arc, but sometimes as I'm building towards the bigger kind of end, I try to do little arcs. So in the game we're in now, in the Jade Masks, there was a travel to a place to help this guy. He was a thief guild master, and he was laying down the mantle of the master of the thieves guild to pass it on to somebody else. So they went and did that, and there were some reveals with the story and stuff like that. But when they came back to this town, Bullens, that they had been in quite a bit, there was a little more opportunity to just spend some time there. There have been other opportunities that I tried to give and didn't last nearly as long. But also the travel, kind of going back to the travel for a minute, in my game recently, the party was on a boat for some time, and it's there were things that happened, but over the course of a week of travel, we kind of allowed for okay, what are you thinking about? What are you what is the wizard researching? You're working on a spell kind of thing right now. What kind of conversations are happening again? What reflections are going on? And to be able to ask those questions and let people kind of role play those things out and talk about them has been a really helpful thing. If anybody else, in the chat has thoughts on things you've done or that, I'd love to hear that too. But I really want to kind of give an encouragement, I guess, to ascending GMs, people, whether you're brand new at it or you've been doing it for 50 years or anywhere in between, that to tinker a little bit with that and to create some space. That's a challenge that I'm going to take up when we get back into the Jade Mask is on a little hiatus right now while Matthew's on sabbatical. But when we jump back into that, that's a thing that I want to do is, to allow for giving space for the players to develop some of that stuff away from the table or at the table, just in a like longer game term kind of thing. So just an encouragement in that, like maybe play with that, maybe try those things out and see, let them research, let them maybe work on some skills or some hobbies. Maybe even Eric, like who's been on here before a couple times. One of the things he liked to do, and he came on and talked about solo play in like table run games before. That kind of, I think, began with he liked to, like in the off time, have his character go and do little side quests, and they weren't like necessarily canon to the game, but they kind of became that, and they helped his backstory flesh out a little bit too. So there may be even some opportunities to do that, and to like allow your players to jump in that way. So I'd love to hear in the comments, after this is posted, just a little bit more about that. Like if you have like some really good ways to use downtime, but that's a fun way to let players lead also, and to let maybe some of the hooks they create build to something that may be a part of like the main arc of the game even. That's a great way to connect those things and let the players take part in the creativity of the way the story is going to go too. So hopefully that's some help, or maybe just a little bit of fodder for your games or for your thought process, or even if you're like, man, I disagree with that completely, that's cool too. Hopefully it can just like spark some creativity, a little bit for all of us. So again, next week we'll have another pre-recorded episode, and then we are going to have another one of these, and then we'll jump into the first back of our live episodes doing a Haversack Hoopla. So if you got questions, any kind of questions about GMing, different games, me or Matthew and our GMing, any of that kind of stuff, drop those into our Gmail, riseofthegm@gmail.com. Or you can DM me here on Instagram. But again, I just want to thank you all. You all are awesome. So thankful for the community that's around us here and just the support you all have given us. And I appreciate you all jumping on with me today. Have a good one.